At some point in our lives, we all ask the question, why are we here? What is my purpose? And today, our guest, Kris Vallotton, founding pastor of Bethel School of Ministry, will give us insight on how to live out our purpose to the fullest.
Kris is also an author, and he's written books entitled Destined to Win and given us a lot of insight about God's plans for your life. Right. Stay tuned. Today, you're watching The Difference. Today, our special guest is Kris Vallotton of Bethel Church of Redding, California. Kris is a best-selling author, a blogger, and has a background in business, counseling, and leadership, as well as ministry. Kris, thank you for joining us here at The Difference.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You have
a big risk.
We've heard, but we had several references say that you would be okay for 8 minutes, which that's how long our show is.
Yeah, that's my attention span right there.
Excellent. That's all we need. You've written a book on a topic that a lot of people are interested in, but I think they define it in multiple ways, and that is just one big word: purpose. How do you define purpose? What is it?
Well, I mean, what did God create you to do? Like, and maybe let's back up. Who are you? And out of that needs to flow what you do, right? Because you need to be a human being before you're human doing. So it's super important that you kind of discover who does God say you are? Yeah. And out of that, an expression, your ministry, your career, your work, all comes, right?
Yeah, so how did that journey unfold for you in finding out who you were and then what that purpose was? Because when I read about individuals that have accomplished a lot, I recognize there's a multitude of talents that can be applied in many ways, but really for each and every one of us, there's one thing we should do and a lot of things we could do. How did you find out what that was?
Well, I think life is a journey, and I think that the journey is probably just as important as the destination, right? That's right. Yeah. And sometimes we're so obsessed with the destination that we actually miss the fun of the journey. Yeah. And so I think that discovering who you are is like, I feel like identity is almost like an onion. I think it's like. It's like you kind of get who you are as maybe in your late teens, you kind of have some idea, and then it unfolds. Some awareness, and I think that part of your the process is other people come into your life. They point out things in you that you don't see in you. Yeah. They water seeds in you that are dormant.
Or they plant seeds in you that you don't want.
That's a whole other topic.
That's a whole other topic right there.
I think it's important because there's a lot of people that, they assume, well, I go to church with this person, they sit in the same service as I do, they must be speaking God's will into my life. And you're like, no, they're just speaking. Now you go find out if that's God's will.
Exactly. I think there's a resonance, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think that all of us need like a Barnabas in our life, right?
Absolutely.
There's an interesting story about Barnabas, of course, is that nobody wants Saul, former Paul. Yeah. And Barnabas, it says, and Barnabas takes hold of Saul. And for the next 14 years, he basically mentors Saul till he becomes the great apostle Paul, right?
Yes.
Writes 13 books of the New Testament. And then he has a cousin, Barnabas has a cousin named Mark, who Paul doesn't like. They have a big conflict, and Barnabas takes a hold of Mark and mentors him for many, many years, and ultimately he writes the book of Mark, right?
Yes.
So here, this guy never writes a book. Barnabas never writes a book of the Bible, but he takes a hold of two men, and they write 2/3 of the New Testament, right?
He was the publishing agent, if you would.
Exactly.
But the thing that I think is, I love your perspective there, because that's something that a lot of people, they miss. And they miss it because it's always Paul and Barnabas. Yeah. But in their time, it was actually Barnabas and Paul.
Yeah.
Barnabas was Paul's credibility.
Exactly.
When Barnabas showed up in a town where he was known, he gave Paul credibility to say what Paul needed to say and do what Paul needed to do. That he wouldn't have had that opportunity had Barnabas not been willing to commit himself to supporting that.
Exactly. And I think that, Barnabas, another thing about Barnabas or the Barnabases of our life is they tend to believe in us before we deserve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's a huge key for becoming all that God's called you to be. It's like somebody has to believe in you before you deserve it, That's and right. I think of Jesus, how Jesus believes in people before they deserve it. In my mind, that's the biggest miracle that Jesus ever did. He takes 12 guys and 11 of them become world changers. Yeah. How do we know that Jesus believed in people before they deserve it? Well, he makes Judas the treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Judas becomes a treasure. Why do you make Judas the treasure? Well, you either want to make him fall, which that wouldn't be true, or you trust people before they deserve it. And that culture that Jesus created caused 11 men to become world changers and caused one man to hang himself, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think even, Jesus, as I would say it in my own terms, is he was gracious to a fault.
Yeah.
He's all-knowing.
Yeah.
He in and of himself is God. He knows who Judas is. He knows what Judas is going to do. And he continually gave Judas an opportunity.
Totally.
Even right up to the point that the soldiers have come from the high priest Caiaphas' house with Judas to the garden. And Jesus looks at him and says, "Friend, why have you come?" Which was almost his last chance.
Yep,
Judas,
absolutely.
Think about this, man. Do you really want to take this step?
Yeah.
And even right up to the end, he was saying, you don't have to go down this road.
And then you have Peter on the other side who denies Christ 3 times.
Yeah.
Right?
After he promised he wouldn't.
After he promised he wouldn't. And after Jesus warns him, right? And one guy hangs himself and the other guy becomes the head of the church, early church.
Correct. Yeah.
So, another thing I think that we have to learn is how to fail successfully.
Yeah.
Because if you do anything, you're going to fail. Like
Absolutely.
Everybody fails.
Yeah.
Yes.
The question is, do you know how to fail successfully?
Yeah.
Like, what have you learned from your failures? Because I really believe that we learn more from our failures than we do our successes.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think sometimes we measure failure in the context of perfection.
Yeah.
We get in a situation where a lot of people look at it and they say, well, it wasn't perfect, but did it succeed? 52 Sundays in a row, we have church here. And I can't tell you that we've had one perfect Sunday.
Yeah.
Where everything went just exactly as it should have gone and could have gone, and it was just perfect. But it was a successful Sunday because what we did is we persevered through whatever setback or delay we had and accomplished and achieved the goal. You know?
And actually, I think that so much of life is about weakness. I think of it like this, like we love, at Bethel Church, we love things like Strength Finders. We read the Strength Finders book. All these different gift tests. We're like, we kind of do some of those things and we love them, and Briggs and Myers, your personality tests and all this stuff. And I think it's all really good. But often I think Jesus, we go to Jesus and we're like, okay, here's my 5 greatest strengths. And he's like, that's awesome. We won't be using you there.
Yeah.
Because you think about, about, for instance, you think about Paul, the Apostle Paul. He's like the most brilliant mind in the area of Judaism, right? Mm-hmm. In the first century, at least trained by the greatest, right? And so he becomes apostle to who? The Gentiles, who he knows nothing about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Peter, who's a fisherman, doesn't know much about Judaism. The Lord's like, okay, you'll be the apostle to the Jews.
Yeah. And he was the one who first reached the Gentiles.
Exactly.
He was informal enough to be the first, but then God said, okay, now that we've got that started, I need to take you out of that role and bring you over here. And the thing that I think really created the success of the first century church was willingness. Yeah. It was not ability, it was not talent, it was not their gifts, it was their willingness to obey what God, through the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ, had asked them to do. When we come back, we're going to have the opportunity to continue this conversation, and I believe that it has the ability to set you on a path for success like you never thought imaginable. You're watching The Difference. As we begin this journey into a new year, what are you striving for in your life? Simply praise His name, knowing that every step you take serves His perfect plan. The power of praise releases the supernatural power of God in your life to accomplish your divine mission.
With your support of any amount, we would like to send you Our God New Beginning Teaching and our Vision 2020 Journal. For your generous gift of $175 or more, You will also receive a Hagee Ministry custom hand-poured candle and a plush Sherpa throw blanket with a Jeremiah 29:11 design. Hagee Ministries is praying for your renewal in this new year.
Together, we can accomplish great things and achieve the unique purpose that God has in store for each and every one of us.
Send your tax-deductible gift today. Call the number on your screen or visit jhm.org/New Year.
At the Sanctuary of Hope, we are dedicated to the sanctity of life. Here, single expectant mothers and their children will have the opportunity to grow in the light and love of Christ. We are now accepting applications and referrals for residency.
Phase 2 of our building project is underway. These lots will become 6 loving Christian homes to mothers and their children.
Please consider partnering with Hagee Ministries today. Call the number on your screen or go to jhm.org/SOHcares.
Welcome back to The Difference. Our guest today, Kris Vallotton, is here sharing some of the topics out of the book that he's written, Destined to Win. You were talking about how to fail or how to
fail successfully.
Yeah, fail successfully and do so with the right perspective and attitude. And there's a lot that people hear about winning and losing, success and failure, but I think that there's something that needs to be stated about heaven's perspective of success versus our perspective of success.
Right,
You know, and how do you address that topic?
Well, I think you kind of said it in our first session there when you're talking about faithfulness. Mm-hmm. Like, in my mind, you don't have control over outcome. Now, you can screw something up, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
But James talks about yeah, exactly, obviously. So when I say that, I'm aware that you can make it go wrong.
Yeah.
But you can't always make it go right. Like, you can't always help what happens to you, but you can always help what happens in you, right?
That's right.
So James talks about business. And he says, don't say you're going to go to such city. You're going to work for a year and make a profit. Say, if the Lord wills. And we all, we believe that God wants to prosper us, but God's idea of prosperity and our idea of prosperity not always the same, right? Yeah. So I have to say, if God is in charge of the outcome, then what am I in charge of? Well, I'm in charge of faithfulness. Yeah. I have to be faithful. Yes, I have to be faithful with what He gave me. How it works out,
it's up to Him.
It's up to Him. We interact with people a lot, right? It's part of what we do. This is part of what we're called to do. Yeah. I can offend people on purpose, but I can't control how people respond to truth, to my ministry, I can control what I say, but I can't control the way you hear it, the way you respond to it. And so, like, even when we're in ministry, like we're talking about business a minute ago, but in ministry, I don't have control over outcome. No. I only have control over faithfulness. Yeah. And if you look at Jesus, for instance, of course, Jesus draws these huge crowds and you're like, successful. Yeah. Then He preaches one message. Mm-hmm. Eat my flesh, drink my blood. Refuses to explain the message, right? And I would say intentionally offends the crowd, and destroys the church He built for 2 years. Yeah. And I'd propose that was a successful day.
Yeah. Because He knew that they had false expectations. Their expectations was tomorrow morning we take over. Yeah. And the whole time He's going, that's not the plan.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that's a challenge in leadership when you as a leader have set a course and the people around you believe that they know the direction you're going, and you go, you can't really know because I myself don't really know where this is going to end up. I just know this is what we're supposed to do right now. And so you have to sometimes have the courage to address their expectations and know that if it's not what they wanted, it could disappoint them. But you just have to be faithful to what you know to be right.
Yeah, and I think that oftentimes the Lord will offend our minds to reveal our hearts.
That's good.
Yeah.
And so, I think oftentimes we think, well, so-and-so made me mad. No, I'm sorry, mad was in you.
Yeah.
The trials.
He just kicked it and woke it up.
Yeah, exactly. A great example of what you just said. Trials, they do not make you; they reveal you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trials review, and they show us what's inside of us, right?
Well, you've talked a lot about Paul and the work that he did. In the New Testament, he writes a verse about a labor of love. Yeah. And he says, that God rejoices in the labor of love that you have done in His name and continue to do. Yeah. And the other day I was considering what is a labor of love? Because there's a lot of people who do things and they'll call it a labor of love, but Paul gives some very clear definitions. Yeah. One, your labor of love is done in God's name, which means that we have to be able to take your name off of it and you not care.
Yeah.
And I know as a pastor, one of the most important things you can have in the program is the name of whoever served, because you need to make sure you give proper recognition, because that's going to be the first call you get on Monday. It's spelled with one L, not two. And you know, it's just such a human thing for us to want credit. And if God says, look, I'm going to ask you for the work. I'm going to ask you to give all you got. I'm going to ask you to lay everything down, and I'm going to take your name off of it.
Yeah, that's great.
And that reveals really quick, where are you serving from?
All of us, you know. Someone once said that success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah.
So I think it's true, and you know, I believe that, you know, God can do lots of stuff through you as long as you don't need to get credit for it. But I'll tell you, you know, in my own life, that's tough, because I feel like there are different people that are wired differently, like, you know, obviously. And I think that each of us have things that we need in our soul. Like, I think significance is very important for people. I think I'm wired for significance. And I think that, and the way that we get that sense of significance sometimes needs to be managed like a sex drive, right? I mean, sometimes I have to manage my soul the way I manage my sex drive. Like, if I know that I need significance and I don't create a healthy path to get it, then I have a reactive life, right? Yes. Which is I grab credit from people. I make sure my name is spelt right on the thing.
Or you become a people pleaser.
I become a people pleaser.
You want them to pat you on the back and encourage you constantly. So whatever it is that they think you should be doing, you invest yourself fully in that. And you know, those create additional unintended consequences and challenges that leave you feeling empty and void. You know, when you find that significance in the fact that you know you're doing what God created you for.
Yeah. One of the things that we teach our students is that if you're jealous of someone, invest in them, and then their victory will be your victory. And I think that how you manage jealousy, like I've been with Bill now 41 years, Bill Johnson, and one of the most, like people say all the time, like, how is it, you know, how's it knowing Bill? Like, what's Bill like behind the scenes? And one of the things I think that people would not know unless you know him is how he deals with his insecurity. Yeah. Because how you deal, like, oh, Bill has insecurity. Everybody has insecurity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How you deal with your insecurity determines whether or not you get the best, right? I love what John Maxwell said, the way you deal with the worst determines whether you get the best.
Yeah.
So if you're going to develop an empowering culture, if you're going to develop a culture like we talked about, the Barnabas spirit, like one of the things we want in our church, in our movement, is we want to be an empowering culture. Yeah. So that people come in small and they get big.
That's right.
Because, you know, Jesus, James, Peter, and Jesus all said, if you humble yourself, you'll be exalted.
Correct.
The challenge in most cultures is you can humble yourself, but you can't be exalted. Yeah. Because typically leadership becomes a lid instead of a foundation. Right? Yeah. So you get exalted and leadership begins to be jealous of you. And what do you do with somebody? How do you treat people when you're jealous determines whether you're empowering or controlling, right? And I've watched Bill over and over empower the person who's already getting the credit.
Yeah, just cheer louder.
Yeah. Cheer louder.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do, frankly.
No, because it requires what the Bible says when Jesus said, if any man comes after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And that's one of those amen pastor verses, and you're like, no. The only thing you can do with a cross is hang on it. You know what I mean? So, you know, before you accept that challenge, just recognize there's a point of pain in your future. You know?
No, exactly. You know, if you don't have pain in your future, I mean, if you don't have pain in your life, you're not growing. And I'm not talking about self-inflicted wounds or, you know, nailing yourself to the cross is not a great plan.
Martyrdom.
Not martyrdom. You know, all of those kind of perspectives.
It's just struggle.
Self-hatred.
Yeah.
Self-hatred masquerades as humility all the time in the church. Yeah. You know, Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Yeah. You know, everyone has to have a big as. Yeah. Right? You got to have a big as, because if you don't love you, you're not going to love them.
Yeah, that's right. And some are bigger than others.
Exactly.
Well, we want to thank you so much for sharing this program with us, and we hope that you'll take the time to look up all of the great materials that we've discussed today, knowing that when you do and you apply God's principles of truth to your life, not only are you destined to win, but you were created for it.
You and your family can explore Israel with Pastor Matt, Kendal, and their children on the 2020 Israel Family Trip. This isn't your typical pilgrimage. This fun and exciting trip is designed for families. More than just visiting historical places, past will meet present as you sail across the Sea of Galilee. Discover ancient antiquities while on an archaeological dig. Recreate the day-to-day life of an ancient biblical village, including herding sheep and making cheese. Float on the Dead Sea and swim in the Mediterranean. Take communion at the Garden Tomb and be baptized in the Jordan River. Whether you're riding ATVs across the desert or taking part in a camel caravan, this is the perfect way to bring the Bible to life for you and your family. Space is limited, so call or go to jhm.org for more information and reserve your spot on this one-of-a-kind tour today.
Go and tell the world that Jesus came, died, and rose again for the forgiveness of your sins. Go and share the good news of your salvation. Take it into the furthermost corners of the world. This charge is for every Christian, but not every Christian knows how to preach amongst the day-to-day rhythms of life. We do, and we can do this together. Connect your passion with ours. Become a Legacy partner today. Call the number on your screen or go to jhm.org/legacy.
Kendal and I are right here in the kitchen with Melissa the Arabian, and we are learning how to make something that we've never made before, but we are learning how to make something we can use over and over again. What is this recipe and what is its purpose?
Well, this is tapenade, which is really just an olive dip from the south of France.
Okay.
And it's, tapenade. It feels fancy even to say it. And yet it's so simple to make. It's a big dish for what is called the aperitif. Which is the French sort of family-friendly cocktail hour. It's the unofficial neighborly moment of France. Neighbors will come over like an hour before dinner time and just have, it can be tapenade.
So here in Texas, it's the lawn chair and the sweet tea in the front yard.
That's exactly what it is.
All right, well,
that's exactly what it is, except with olives.
It's called the aperitif.
The aperitif.
Yeah,
the aperitif. That's exactly right.
I have aperitif. That's what she said. All right.
What I love about it is the French get that having people in your home and hospitality isn't about performance.
No.
It's about connection. It's about service.
Yeah.
Right? Biblical hospitality. Look at Abraham. Right? It's about service.
Absolutely.
Right? So you don't have to be this fancy. In France, you know what is like, I think the number one aperitif item is Pringles. I don't know why that is, but I'm not kidding. Can this go upside down? Can I do that?
I think so.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But if you want to go a little fancier, hey, do you want to be in charge?
I would love to.
Okay,
So some
great.
olives, green
Just olives, yes.
black olives.
Green olives, black olives, whatever.
The juice, doesn't
yeah,
matter?
whatever. Well, you do want to have them drained, but a little juice adds a little tang.
Juice.
No, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And then we're going to add in a little bit of capers.
These are
Do you want to do
caper
that?
berries?
Not all of those. That would be a lot.
Just do about half.
Capers are really salty and briny, so they add a lot of flavor.
Well, they can help you say teeth.
And then
Some garlic.
Fun fact, for my wedding, my mother-in-law made a huge tapenade because she was like, we can't have you guys get married without a tapenade there. Yeah, isn't that fun? You can't, that's how you...
This is lemon, which is squeezed and looks like you got zest in
That's
there.
right, yes, that's gonna give some tang to it.
This is a zester.
Yep, and you just, zest it all out. Now, a typical tapenade has anchovies, but we're using...
Scratch that. We're using
I know,
some
they're not
tuna.
anchovy fans. I am.
The chicken
But
of the sea.
We're using tuna, which I like because it adds a little bit more heft and some protein. So we're gonna do tuna. Now this, we just have to pulse up. Now the good news is you don't even have to do that because we have it right here for you.
He wants to do it all right.
Here, let me show you just a little thing from the French.
Exploded.
The Crostini Etiquette. that if the food is right by you,
that goes with Crostini's?
Yes. Cool. There's a whole system.
You learn all kinds of things on this show.
You, as the person in front of the Crostini, you are in charge of making the toast for everybody. So you offer it to everybody else, and then you make
so
your
you don't pre-make them. You just kind of serve them.
No, this is how it's served. Yeah, this is how it's served. So you would put it on that, and then you would hand it around. So I'll set this right here for you.
Thank you
so that
very much.
That you can eat it. But don't let this stop you from being super simple in your hospitality. Hospitality is not a performance.
No.
Right? It's about welcoming people into your home and sharing time together.
Without question. And, you know, the thing about it is it's where you invest yourself into the lives of others. And there's a lot of people that they crave community, they crave connection, but they're never willing to go past the desire into actual, investment of yourself. And I think whenever you share simple food, whenever you share the simple things of life, it's your way of not, getting involved in somebody else's emergency or getting involved in somebody else's crisis, but you're just saying, look, we share the same space and we need to do this together. And Kendal and I have always said, teamwork makes the dream work. You're better together, and obviously you can be better together with olive tapenade for the aperitif.
The aperitif.
The aperitif.
Or whatever you call it.
If
just
you
bringing
don't have
people in.
aperitif at your house, you need to get two. But if you need to share some food with good friends, this is a great recipe. Kendal, tell them where they can find it on Facebook.
Yes, you can go to our Facebook. You can also follow Miss Melissa here and get these recipes, and we would love to connect with you.
Thank you guys for watching The Difference.
Do you want to learn more about the show? Follow us on Facebook at Matt and Kendal Hagee, on Instagram at Matt Hagee and at Kendal Hagee, on Twitter at Matt Hagee and at Kendal Hagee. The Difference with Matt and Kendal Hagee.
Kendal and I want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you enjoyed our guests, Kris Vallotton and Melissa d'Arabian. There's a lot of things that we can consider to be our purpose in life, but the truth is God has a specific purpose for each and every one of us. When we embrace His plan and we release the preconceived notions that others have put into us, or that we may assume are destined to be ours, we find ourselves on a path to success that not only satisfies our lives, but is a blessing to the lives of those who are around us. Here on this show, we call that being a difference maker. And that's what we want you to be each and every day in some way. Make a difference in the lives of others, showing them the love of Jesus Christ and how they can be a light to the world.
That's right. We want to stay connected with you even after this show. So invite you to come and follow us, Facebook, Instagram. We love to read your comments, and we want to share our lives with you each day. So we also have some really great discussions on the Matt and Kendal Hagee podcast. So you need to go.
She talks, I
listen, and he talks. So we want you to subscribe and stay up to date with the latest episodes. So let's connect and discover God's purpose and plan for our lives together as we make a difference.
We also want to thank our friends and partners who support this ministry, that recognize what we're doing is sharing the good news of the hope of the gospel of Jesus Christ with a world that desperately needs to hear it. If you'd like to find out more about how you can connect with this ministry and become a partner yourself, go to HageeMinistries.org.